was real. Listen.
In this episode of Curious Explorers, you'll hear part 2 of our interview with none other than Marty Stalker. You remember, he is the director of the documentary film Hostage to the Devil, all about the life, the work, and controversies of exorcist and Irish priest Father Malachi Martin. In this part, we get deeper into some of the interviews with people who knew Father Martin best, some of the strange things that happen to Marty whenever he tries to talk about exorcism or Father Martin, and much more. And if you get a chance to check out the YouTube version, you'll see one of the many visual anomalies we saw during our interview with Marty. If this sounds interesting to you, if you're curious, stay tuned. So interesting, and I want to be mindful of your time.
That's fine.
You've interviewed so many people. I'm going to read some names of the people you interviewed, and I want you to think about, is there anyone in particular that had, and it might not be anyone who had the most significant impact, but we've talked about Robert Blair Kaiser, Robert Morrow, Ralph Sarchi, Lauren Gomez, the psychotherapist, Father Cesar Trucchi. Am I pronouncing?
Trucchi, yeah.
Trucchi, yeah. Sorry. Matt Baglio, who was, played a little bit of a smaller role in the documentary. And on your podcast, Richard Gallagher, Dr. Richard Gallagher, the psychiatrist, who's, because he's a psychiatrist, to me is also an especially interesting figure because it's not something that's really encouraged. But I'm wondering if any of these people were you like, there was a turning point, something either in the direction of the film or inside of you where you're like, speaking to this person made something clear that wasn't before?
I think generally across the board, the access we got to people was incredible, purely because we weren't a large production company. We didn't have an agenda. We weren't the BBC or anybody with a pretty obvious agenda going into the subject matter. So we were very independent. It was just me and a very small team of crew. So that opened up a lot more doors for us, in the sense that people were more open to the fact that this was literally an indie filmmaker trying to make an authentic story of the man. And I think, Bob Kaiser, he told me he was dying. He was about to die. So that was powerful in a sense that he was the very first main interview that I did in the America shoot. I knew he was dying, and I gave him the platform, and I'm so glad. I'm grateful for his time, and I just gave him the opportunity to speak. And even to his deathbed, he had so much hatred for the man, and I was trying to sit down and try and look him in the eyes and really understand why he still hated the man to his core. And I saw glimpses of, like, he did really respect Father Martin at the same time, and I could see that in his eyes. As we say, the eyes are the mirrors of the soul. And it was a very vulnerable, delicate interview, but it was a very much needed interview, and I have no regrets for doing it. And there was still a little bit of warmth in there before he passed, and there was still a bit of sort of respect for what Father Martin had done, and but it was sad for me to witness a man who had still so much hatred for his former friend, and there's only 3 people on this earth, or 3 people who knew what happened there. It was Kaiser, Father Martin, and the wife. So really, I couldn't. I knew I needed to give him the platform, but I also needed to give him the space to say what he wanted, but also to really know that I would never ever find the truth, because the wife had passed as well. So yeah, I had no regrets there. And then Art Bell, so we swung around.
Yes.
Yeah, Art Bell was very extremely paranoid, because obviously what I hadn't known was there was an attack on his residence I
didn't know that.
It was a few months before we rocked up. I didn't know this either at all. And he had the drone up at the time, and he had spotted us before we'd got to the house, because he lived quite remote, and he was very, very, very paranoid. But the fact that we didn't rock up with cameras and it wasn't a big crew, it was literally just me and Kat at the time, who was our US producer. It was just two of us with the camera kit, and that was it. And the access we got was incredible because we were very unassuming, and we just came in and I like to just chat with the contributor. I don't like to make it like a big deal. I just want to make it as formal as possible. And Art Bell was incredible, because I knew how much clout he had. I knew how much, how many followers he used to have especially back in the 90s and on the Coast to Coast show. And that was a huge, and he didn't do interviews. He never did interviews. And again, this is what we were working with, was the fact that I think something clicked in them, in the sense that when I spoke to them on the phone, they just knew that this was not, this guy's not, he's not, after Martin, he hasn't got an agenda. He's in a sense an open book. And it was Bob Kaiser who caught me out, because he's savvy enough. He's a journalist. He was a very experienced journalist, and he actually put me on the spot, and he said, "Well, so what do you think about the man?" And this is back in very early days, and I sort of naively said, "Oh, I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence with the man. I don't want to say." And Kaiser sort of smirked, and he said, "Do you understand? You're telling a story here. You cannot remain objective. Your subject. It will become a subjective story, in a sense that you cannot remain 100% objective on a man you're making a film about." And he called me out, and I respect him for that, because I came away thinking he's absolutely right. I as a storyteller, as the writer and the director of this film, I need to make a decision. Otherwise, this is going to get so too ambiguous. I need to. I learned a lot from Kaiser in that sense, where I did go away and actually thought, I do need to make a decision about this man myself before I go any further. So Art Bell and Kaiser, yeah, they were the first two interviews of the US trip, and I was really, really surprised by the access they granted us. And Ralph Sarchi was he was tough as old boots, that man. So he's very, as you can imagine, I'm sure you've seen a lot of his content online. I respect him so much, because he just says what he feels, and he's got a big heart, and he loved Father Martin. He was a close friend, and he was a spiritual director and a big mentor to him. And he sussed me out for a long time. I need to work out who this guy is, what his agenda is, and where he's going with this story. And it took him a while. It took him about a year to really open the doors to me. So Ralph Sarchi was a big contributor, and also purely because he had hours of footage that nobody had ever seen about the man before. He had filmed at a Lorraine and Ed Warren conference. He had filmed Father Martin at one of his talks, and no one had ever done that before, and no one had ever seen him at these conferences before. So I didn't. Well, it was one of those things where, as you talk to the man, he reveals what he's got, and then I say, "Is there any chance that we could use it in the film?" And he can either say yes or no, and he gave us the archive, and to this day I'm extremely grateful for. And that opened up another sort of door, because he was good friends with John Zaffis, and I knew John Zaffis had a lot of clout in the paranormal world as well. So then it was very much, as soon as they knew we were boots on the ground, they were like, "Okay, these guys are serious. They come all the way from Ireland. They're on the ground. So let's make it happen for them." And that was a very warm welcome from all the characters and contributors, really.
It's funny how small a world it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, I mean, getting Art Bell is a huge get.
Oh my God.
It's a huge get. I mean, he disappeared for years, I mean, you say he was paranoid, and it's like, are you paranoid if they really are trying to get you? And I think that would be kind of how he felt, because there were lots of people who were interested in talking, getting Art Bell in many ways.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's a really impressive get.
Again, it was so naive. I'll be totally honest with you. All I knew about Art Bell was in my own researching the Coast to Coast. But when I speak to American friends, they were like, "Art Bell, wow, my God, they're like yourself. Your reaction to yourself." And again, that's probably why I don't sort of disarm people when I meet them, but I treat everybody on the same on the same playing field, on the same level. I don't put anybody up on pedestals, and I work with actors and actresses, and I work with celebrities now and again, and I just speak to them like you're on my level. I don't give anybody that sort of pedestal to sit on, but to stand on. So, and also it was just, I think, in my line of work, if you go in with your intention and your intention is pure, I truly believe doors will open for you, and you will be assisted along that journey. And I believe, and it was our intention, and my intention anyway, was to make something that was as authentic as possible and as pure as possible. And I finished the film in Afghanistan, where it was the same scenario where back in 2021, I went over with a friend of mine, ex-military friend, and we made another documentary, and it was about Afghanistan, the 20-year occupation, $2 trillion spent, etc. And it was asking those really hardcore questions, but we did it in an unorthodox way, where we didn't tell anybody we were going there. We slipped into the country, we grew beards, we wore local dress. We just slipped into the communities, and we told our story, and our intention was pure. Our intention was, we don't want to speak to whoever gets lined up for as generals. We don't want to speak to these politicians. We want to speak to the people on the ground. And I believe, and the access we got was absolutely incredible. And it goes back to your intention, and our intention was totally pure. And I go back to my sense of purpose being grounded into me from that mushroom ceremony. It literally was, there was two big sort of teachings from that. Was your sense of purpose is this, and it was to tell authentic stories, but you also don't chase an audience. Your audience will follow you. This was all this teachings that was handed down to me, and that's where it was with Hostage to the Devil. I was naive. I was didn't know what to expect, and that helped. And also my intention was pure. I wanted to make something as authentic as possible. So hence all these doors open for us, and I was extremely grateful.
That's amazing. Marty, two things off the top of my head or that come to mind as you're speaking. One, if you ever want to come back and talk either on this podcast or my regular one about psilocybin and your experience, I think that'd be fascinating, because it is such a huge thing now and people have experienced such transformation.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I want to ask you, you are creating, there's another project you're working on. Is it a sequel to Hostage to the Devil? Is it a different take? Is it something else entirely? I was wondering if you wanted to talk about your next project.
Yeah, so The Devil Within was very much, I wanted to look more at sort of demonic oppression, rather than going straight for the big guns, which is the possession stage, which is extremely, extremely rare, as we all know. So I wanted to look more at the oppression phase, the demonic infestation, the demonic oppression, and I wanted to film a rite of exorcism with multiple cameras. It hasn't been done before, and I'm not saying this to sort of sensationalize the subject matter, but William Friedkin tried to do it in his last documentary, and it was the whole sort of issue where the camera got to the chapel door closed, and said, "Oh, we're not allowed in anymore." And I felt as an audience, he'd built up this exorcism, and I was vested in it, and I'm on this journey with you. And then at the end of the film, it was a bit of a cop out, really, where the doors closed and we weren't allowed in for the exorcism. We could hear the audio, but we weren't allowed in. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting sick of people telling me that, oh, you won't be allowed to do that. Spiritually, it's wrong. And you know what? I'm at a stage now where I'm like, I want to objectively, even though it's impossible, objectively as possible, show a rite of exorcism. And that's the plan for the second installment. It can be a standalone or it can be a follow-on. We haven't really decided yet. We don't want to pigeonhole the film too soon, but really that's my passion, is to bring some of the old characters back together, reunite them together again. And because their lives changed after the documentary came out, as you can imagine, Lorene Gomez and Jimmy as well, and Robert as well, Ralph, a lot of people's lives, not so much changed, but their exposure they got had intensified. So I'd like to reunite a few of the old contributors together and take a case from start to finish, in the sense of there's a few cases that I've got my eye on at the moment that I've been sort of looking through the research notes and stuff. So that's my dream, is to not to sensationalize the subject matter, but to objectively show the audience what William Friedkin couldn't do in that chapel, which is to actually open the doors of the chapel and bring the cameras inside. So that's what I want to do with the second installment.
So fascinating.
Yeah, I'm
So compelling.
it's good. Even now, I'll be getting, no, you know, won't be allowed to do that, but there are ways to do it and respectfully do it as well. And I'm very respectful of the subject matter, and I'm a military man, so everything will be prepared as much as we can, and everything will be thought out. And yeah, I just feel like I have the skills and the experience now to deliver a second installment. So.
Are you exclusively looking at Roman rites of exorcism?
Yeah. So we've been speaking to a bishop who potentially could be a good match for this, but it wouldn't be. Yeah, it's difficult because a lot of Catholic priests and bishops are tied in, and they have to answer to their bosses, and so we'll have to find literally, I'm looking for the equivalent of Father Martin at the moment out there, who was a bit of not a troublemaker, but a bit of a disruptor. And that's who I'm looking for now, is somebody who isn't tied to the actual church itself. I'm looking for somebody who's independent and who can perform the traditional rite.
Would you look at specific countries for that, or do you find, it strikes me that a lot of this took place in the United States.
Yes, and they're all women.
Yeah, I mean, it does strike me, when you look at certain, when you look at things like that, where that also kind of, I know there was an Ed and Lorraine Warren case that did not get a Roman rite exorcism, and that was male. But generally speaking, you do see a lot of women, and I don't know if that's because women are more likely to request help, ask for help, get help. I don't think women are uniquely more likely to be possessed. But it is interesting that lots of these cases are taking place in the United States. And I wonder if that's just, marketing. Is that just because you get to hear of those cases more?
Yeah.
Is that just, or are there cases in other countries that might be, we might not be hearing about, or might not be as accessible.
Yep.
And just a curiosity about that. And I maybe not Western, maybe cases in countries that are not, necessarily Western, Western countries.
Yeah, I was, for my research trip for the sequel, I was watching closely a case in Bavaria in Germany. So I flew to Germany and met the woman, unfortunately. And her case was, and it still is, an incredible case, to the point where there was video footage of crucifixes hanging upside down the ceiling, and really incredible, I would say, footage. And just even talking about that case, I'm getting a bit of resistance. So sorry, I'm getting a bit confused here. I knew this would happen. So there's a case in Germany that I've been looking at very, very closely, and that's very intense, to the point where we would have to bring her to Germany to the team in America, purely because I feel like the teams in America, the characters in America that I've met are more open to this kind of storytelling, and they want to do. They don't want to. Again, they don't want to sensationalize it, but I found a lot of the American friends of mine are a lot more open to doing this than a European or a more conservative kind of German team or whatever.
And they have more independence.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So it's going to be definitely working with a lot of my friends in America. It's New England is a hot spot. Yeah. So Connecticut.
I spent a lot of time up there. It's true, and there's a lot of a lot of the paranormal investigative world is kind of focused in that area.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're seeing this, Traci, but we're getting a lot of glitches on his video as he was talking about resistance. Yeah.
So that we'll have to look at the video later. I haven't noticed that as much. There was earlier, but halfway into our interview, I saw a noticeable white orb-like thing.
That's at the 52-minute mark.
So you noticed it too?
I clocked it at 52
okay.
minutes. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, am I just seeing...
No.
Okay.
Happens a lot. I just, again, it goes back to what I was talking about, the resistance, and about even bringing up her case in my head. I get suppressed by this wave of confusion, and it tries to sort of distract me and throw me off the message. And that's when I know I got goosebumps now, just thinking about her again. And she's a case that it's a very, very powerful case, and the footage and the evidence that she's gathered over the years is remarkable. And whether the audience is ready to see it or not is a different thing. But and again, it goes back to as a content creator, is I could line up 6 cameras and we could do an exorcism, and it could take 3 days, it could take 3 weeks. Even if we do pick up a manifestation or something, abnormal, people are still going to think we've rigged the room, or you have to be in that room with the case, with the case study, with the person, with the team, and you have to feel it for yourself. And unfortunately, I can't make that happen for the audience, but I just need to go in the second film. I just need to go in with a very skeptical head, not too skeptical that it gets irritating, but I need to go in with the team and to bring in a psychiatrist, whoever it's going to be from the get go. You get films where they just bring in the science, the science anchor. They say a few words and they go away again. I want that science person to be, that science specialist to be in the room, experiencing this like we all are. So that's the aim. It's taken years. Unfortunately, we were getting really close to getting it made, and then COVID struck, and we were all grounded, and then the film's sort of been shelved in a sense until we gather momentum again. But I really do feel like the time is starting to happen for us now, and we can get the momentum back and assemble a team, basically Avengers assemble, get everyone back together with all. It's funny because everyone's got like a specialist skill, and we bring them all together, and it's like the Avengers come back, and it's like, why are we doing this again? And like, don't you want to
Exorcist assemble?
Don't you want a peaceful life? And I was like, no, I don't want a peaceful life. I want to just keep telling my stories, and if it means going to New England and making a film there, then.
Did you see that? Right after Marty said the words New England, there's an orb that you can see arcing from slightly to the right of his head over and down on the right side of the screen. It's really fast, but we'll play it again here.
Don't you want a peaceful life? And I was like, no, I don't want a peaceful life. I want to just keep telling my stories, and if it means going to New England and making a film there, then if it means going to Germany, we'll do
there.
It. Yeah.
Yes, if you come to New England, we'll definitely go grab a drink.
Absolutely.
Marty, the last thing, and I feel like you must be exhausted, because I know it's later for you, right?
No, it's okay. It's only 6:30.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
But still, when you were talking a few moments ago about your next documentary, I'm going to tell you something that kept going through my mind, and I don't know if it sounds too far afield. And I told Kathy about this offline, and I told the person about it offline. But again, we had this kind of window where we did a few of these types of episodes in a row. We've looked at other topics as well that we're not remotely touching on, things that are, I hate to use the word evil because it sounds so dramatic, but when you have your cameras and everything, there's the things that will be caught on camera, things that will be caught on audio, and then there will be the things people perceive that won't be recorded, or they won't look the same. And like Kathy and I have talked about how that can be the most personally compelling evidence. But it's not something then you can show to a million people and say, oh, see, when I interviewed my colleague who only agreed to come on, I think as a favor, was in shadow, wore sunglasses and a hoodie, but I get why he wants to do that. And I'm telling you, like, it's the only interview I've ever edited fully that night and maybe watched a few times in 24 hours because I was so unnerved with what I experienced. If somebody were to tell me, no matter what I've read, that they had been experiencing a demonic oppression or infestation, I would still have a hard time believing them, even having experienced some weird stuff. While we were recording, we had lots of audio anomalies. Some showed up on the audio, some didn't. There was probably about 5 minutes where he was telling me about this, where his face changed and it wasn't him. And I kept blinking and I'm thinking, I'm half listening to him and I'm transfixed by this thing that was not human. And at some point later in the interview, he's talking about his own way of describing what he thinks are these different kind of levels of, I'm going to say, entity. And as he was talking about them, I was watching these shadow-like things moving at where the corners of the ceiling and the wall met. And again, like I've said, I've had, experiences on and off for, forever. And so has Kathy, but this was so unique. But for me to tell anybody, and I'm sure people who listen to the podcast will be split into two camps, right? Because it's not going to show up on the video, or didn't in the same way. Like you could kind of make it out, but it was so personally powerful in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
I laugh sometimes when I get nervous, which is a little bit off. But it was so unnerving. I just want to point something out really quickly. While we were recording this, I didn't hear anything strange. But what's interesting is I'm talking about other unnerving and I would say paranormal phenomena while recording a previous episode talking about supposedly evil or not great activity, otherworldly activity. As I'm mentioning that here, there's a strange audio anomaly. And as I'm looking in my editing program, I can see that it's in my track. It's reading it as if it's in my microphone, but it's not something I heard at the time. I'd be interested to see what you think. Is it supernatural? Is it technical? Something else? Let us know. I'll play it again here. I laugh sometimes when I get nervous, which is a little bit off. But it was so unnerving. And as you're talking about having, 6 cameras or whatever, even from the cases that were described in Hostage to the Devil, the book, like, how do you translate that if something is like, I feel like there was something that wanted me to know it was there and be unnerved. It was too sustained and I was completely sober and there was no reason, otherwise that I could think of. But it's so hard to demonstrate something to somebody who either has to kind of take your word for it, the feeling or what you see or whatever. This was totally long-winded and tangential, but it's that kind of when you were filming these things. I mean, what do you do if it's like, I felt it, I saw it, but it doesn't translate to electronic, recording devices, or what do you do other than describe it?
Well, it's a similar scenario to yourself, where in the film, we bring Robert back to Father Martin's last exorcism. People call it an exorcism, but I believe it wasn't a minor exorcism, but of a young girl in Connecticut, and it was very snowy. And so we bring Robert's never been back since, and Robert was, I'm not sure the audiences who haven't seen the film, Robert became sort of Father Martin's driver for the last 10 years of his life. We bring Robert back to this house, this remote house in the woods in Connecticut. It's snowy, it's desaturated, it looks incredible from a cinematic point of view. And we had 2 cameras and we filmed the car approaching the house down the lane and thought nothing of it, moved on. And I got back to the apartment that night and I was going through all the footage from the day's shooting and I accidentally sped up the footage. And what I didn't notice on that at the time was 2 cameras shooting the same thing is as the Jeep is arriving in the woods, there's literally a shadow behind the car, and the shadow doesn't go beyond the car. It literally follows the Jeep as it goes all the way to the house. And we didn't notice this at the time. And I put a little behind the scenes clip together. It's like, oh, look at this. Look, it's so creepy. And it's following the car into the house. And half the audience are like, that's whatever, that's just a phenomenon, that's just, coincidence, clouds, light shifting. And again, it goes down to, you really can't. You can't force your own opinion onto your audience. And it doesn't matter if you've got the world's most captured evidence of phenomenon. You've just got to present it as best as you can and as objective as you can, and walk away from it. Otherwise, you'll just go crazy trying to prove it. And I've seen those photographs with the big yellow circle around things. It's like, oh, look at here, and they put a yellow circle around it. I'm looking at it and going, nope, still can't see it. It's and they get so like, oh, what do you mean you can't see it? It's like, well, I can't see it. You're telling me there's a shadow figure there. You put a yellow circle around it, doesn't mean it's there. It's yeah. You just got to step away and just sort of, within oneself, know what you've experienced, understand what you've experienced, trying to dissect what you've experienced, and step away and go, right, okay, that was my own experience, and that's where it shall remain. You can't force your own experience onto an audience member. Unfortunately, they've got to experience it for themselves. And some people might never experience it, which is fine.
You just have to tell the story.
Yeah.
I mean, Traci and I talk about that a lot. I don't really present evidence that much or that often, mainly because, earlier in my career, I was all about it. I was all about, capturing pictures, capturing this stuff. And I'm not anymore. And part of that is that I don't investigate for the same reasons that I did in the past. In the past, I investigated to prove something to myself. And now I generally don't. Now I generally investigate for what's there versus for me to accept what's there. But I think that in a case like what you're talking about, people are either going to find the story compelling or they're not, and they're not going to be convinced on visual evidence. You know what I mean? Not in this day and age, because anything can be manufactured, but if the storytelling is compelling, that could open the door to the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's empathy with characters. I think they can empathize with characters and they can go on their journey. There's been too many television, especially investigation. I'm not sure about America, but in the UK, there's been some awful paranormal investigation shows which have done such damage to the industry.
Most Haunted.
There's a story about Most Haunted where the cameraman turned to one of the specialists and said, we've been here all night. We filmed everything. Nothing's happened. And he turned around to me and said, "By the time the edit's finished, there will be something in this house."
Yeah.
So it's just destroyed it's just destroyed the industry in the sense of people just don't believe anything they see now. And obviously AI, it's got even worse now with the integration of AI. So it's on all this face swapping and all this ID theft and stuff. So it comes down to trusting the storyteller at this point. That's why Traci and I, we talk about this a lot, where to me, I think personal experiences are the most compelling evidence that there are, right? So if you're talking to somebody, if you live in a home and you say this has happened, every day for the past year, you're here every year. If it doesn't happen to me today, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I've been doing this for 35 years and I know what can be manufactured. I know how editing can work. So I do think it comes down to how you tell the story. I do think it comes down to, less the evidence of the event and more the emotion and the narrative of the event. People have already written off the film before. Like even with the first film, the people already wrote off the film before they watched it because they've already got a preconceived notion of the man and they've already got this sort of count like this. This is who I think Father Martin is, and there's no way to sway them. And a lot of people wrote off the film. A lot of his disciples really were critical on introducing an opponent in the film. Where I'm like, well, this is unfortunately, you do go through life and you are going to be someone's enemy, regardless of how good you are as a person. You are going to tick somebody off eventually down the line. So, well, it gets into the culty world. Yeah, it gets into the culty world, the culty world, and I'm not saying the cult of Father Martin, but I found a lot of strong advocates of the man to the point where it was getting a little bit culty, and it was.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
I mean, there was definitely moments where you thought, if this person were talking about David Koresh, I wouldn't be surprised. And just because there are people who accepted everything that he said without caveat doesn't mean that there wasn't value to what he said, but there definitely was a feeling of being, I'm not just an advocate for this person, I am a follower of this person. You know, I'm an acolyte of this person.
Yeah, he filled a void in so many people's lives in unique ways to them. You know, he was a spiritual director to many. He was a confidant. He was a friend. He was a father figure someone didn't have. He just filled so many voids. And I mean, it would have been unprofessional of me not to introduce an opponent. And Kaiser was the only one who was like, yeah, I'll come on camera, I'll come on record. A lot of the other opponents would not come on record, unfortunately.
It was funny because when he dropped that little tidbit, you were like, oh, you know, because he kind of held back on it for a long time, but I didn't sense hatred from him. I didn't even really sense disdain. I sensed more along the lines of, I see through this guy and I don't believe. It wasn't just a sense of like, oh, I have a vendetta against this guy. I really believe this. I thought that was something that worked for your documentary, you know, that you presented both.
Otherwise it becomes propaganda. And it does. It's I just, when you meet someone, you know, they're just gripped with so much strong emotion of someone, and you just want them to let that go, let that like anger go, and you just grip it. Sometimes the past can keep its claws in you, and I just felt like he was just tormented by Father Martin, even though Father Martin had died, you know, 99 where he died, but he was still gripped by this man in a way in his past. He just never let go of his past, and I also, in my own personal life, my own personal journey, I believe that, you know, every single person is their own central character in their story. So you are your own protagonist in your own story. So did Father Martin have enemies? Absolutely, 100%.
Marty, this was so fascinating. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your coming on our podcast, which is actually still in its first year.
Brilliant.
Although it's gained some traction. We're super excited. But, you know, your film was so compelling. Your podcast is so compelling. I know how busy you've got to be. I can only imagine. So we so appreciate your coming on. Is there anything we didn't ask you that we should have, or anything you want to add that we didn't get to?
No, I think the origin story of the podcast was, the producer Chris and I was sat there one day and we realized we had hours and hours of interviews that we didn't use, and they warranted a platform, and we set up the podcast during lockdown, and it's obviously, like yourselves, it's a passion project, so it takes a lot of time, and again, if your intention is pure with something, then doors will open, and we only find that now, 3 years in, that the podcast is starting to get some traction, and that's because we are allowing these voices to be heard again, and to give them a platform. And I'm very, very grateful in a sense for Malachi Martin, in a sense he started my career off, and I'll always be grateful for that. He was a fascinating subject matter, and I'm still learning new things about him every day. So no, I think I'm just grateful. I always, when people reach out to you, then you know then the transaction is going to be a positive one. I don't like cold calling people, although I do a lot of cold calling as a filmmaker. You know, please give me money to make this film. But when people reach out to me and Chris and express an interest in what we're doing, and then I could speak for hours and give you as much time as you want. So I'm very grateful for that, and good luck with the podcast as well. I listened to a few episodes as well, especially on the Hostage of the Devil episode, and I just think what you bring to the subject matter is you are objective, you are skeptical but not skeptical, but it becomes too irritating. You leave doors open, and you do like to go down and investigate them further, and you are objective, but also you are subjective in the sense that you know what you believe in. So it's not forced down your throat as a listener. So I think the podcast that you're doing is incredible, and obviously the subscribers is the number is evidence of that. So thank you very much.
So
thank
much.
you.
And we'll put your information in the show notes. So anything you want us to share with people, we will. How to find out more about your podcast and the documentary and your next release.
Yeah, all good.
let us
Yeah,
know.
the plant medicine as well. I've got some incredible experiences with psilocybin
talk about that.
and ayahuasca as well. So I've got that is obviously a separate discussion, but I would
Yeah.
love to talk about my journey with plant medicine over the last 5 years. It's been to the point where I'm making a feature film this year about my experiences in the ceremony of ayahuasca. So yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
And if you do get out here, make sure you connect with us.
There's a list. I'll do a little road trip.
We can all get together. There's plenty of places we can.
I was invited to Lorraine Warren's when she was alive to her museum of the occult.
To her museum.
Yeah, that was
John and Tony runs that now. I think.
So we met Tony, and it was like, "Do you want to see the Annabelle doll?" I was like, "Yes," and then
yes,
he showed it to me. And I was like, "What is that? It's like it's a raggedy Ann doll."
Quite look like it doesn't quite look like the.
He was great because he gave us the sort of walk around voiceover narration, got the music and the speakers, and I was just like, I was like, "Is sure that's Annabelle? Yeah, is sure that's the Annabelle doll?" It's like, yeah, don't touch it. But it was an incredible experience, and I had Tony on the show 2 years ago, and I just finished a podcast with a guy from Belfast in Ireland, Northern Ireland, who had Lorraine Warren over to Belfast before she died when she was 18
I listened to that. That was fascinating.
That's great.
That was fascinating.
But I mean, my American friends are always saying, call in next time you're in. So I'll do a big road trip, especially on the East Coast, and just
you don't have to do that big of a road trip. We're all within a couple of hours. And Traci and I are planning a trip to Ireland. So when we go out there, we're gonna drag you out as well.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Marty, thank you
very much.
No worries.
Really, and we will talk again. This has been another episode of Curious Explorers. If you like the episode, and come on, we know you did, make sure to like, share, follow, leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to hear more of. And until next time, as always, stay curious.
Keep exploring.
Bye for now.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
You've just listened to the Curious Explorers podcast with the Kathy Kelly and Traci Stein. If you enjoyed the episode, remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. And of course, until next time, stay curious.
The paranormal is real. It is real. The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real.